Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I welcome you to our program today, and this week and next week we're going to deal with some issues in the court systems in Idaho, and these are very, very important issues. This week we're going to deal with drug courts in Idaho, and the question is, are those courts a deterrent to crime? In order to deal with this particular issue, we have three guests today, and we're very pleased to have them. To my far left on our program is Tanya Reynolds. She is, in our district, the drug court coordinator. Tanya, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And next to her, we're pleased to welcome Joe Miller, who is from the past, a drug court participant. And Joe, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And very pleased to have Idaho Magistrate, or Judge Penny Friedlander, and welcome to the program. And I have to add that it's because of you that we're able to do these 2 weeks, and we thank you for your role in causing this to happen.
Thank you.
And I'm so pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all, it's Janelle Burke, who's an attorney and also works as a clerk for a judge, a law clerk, and it's appropriate for her to be here today. And good to see you, Janelle. And next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who is the Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and we will commence today's questioning with Janelle Burke.
My first question has to do with the scope of the drug problem and why it is that we need specialty drug courts. And I'm going to start with Judge Friedlander and ask her if she could please tell us a little bit about why we need drug courts. And then if we could turn to Tanya, who might explain a little bit about the drug courts, some statistics. And then Joe, from a personal perspective, why it's important. So let's start with Judge Friedlander. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Drug courts, I think, grew out of a judicial response to a growing concern in our country regarding the magnitude of heightened use of drugs and substances and the scope of that use. Not only have we seen it more frequently, I think judicially we see the overflow of drug use, not to just the obvious things such as a felony possession of methamphetamine, but perhaps Child Protective Act proceedings where there is methamphetamine ingested, for example, by a toddler in a home, or exposure to drugs, or parental neglect because the parents are addicted to a substance. We also saw it in divorce cases, family law matters. So I think judicially we just saw that there is a very, very large problem in our society, unfortunately including our immediate community. Also, there's a concern about recidivism rates, the revolving door, I guess, of justice, you might say, and that penitentiaries were becoming fuller and fuller of people who had committed the crime of possession of a felony scheduled substance without any other attendant crimes. So their main issue was addiction. And unfortunately, we just saw a very high recidivism rate, also understanding that it was very costly to keep people in penitentiaries, and not seeing that their behavior was changing as they became integrated back in society. There were some words that were spoken by our Chief Justice Gerald Schroeder, who is our Chief Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court, on January 9th, 2006 to the legislature. If I could share those with you, I just find they're very compelling. Judge Schroeder stated to the legislature, and he was talking about funding for drug and mental health courts, and he stated, since their inception, over 1,300 persons who might have gone to the penitentiary otherwise have graduated from these courts. Last year, 40 drug-free babies were born to women in drug courts who might otherwise have given us severely damaged infants, bearing staggering medical costs. In my many meetings with professionals, exposure to cases, the sights and sounds before my own eyes and ears, one word keeps surfacing as the poison of our culture: methamphetamine. I shouldn't express a personal opinion, perhaps, but I will. No outside enemy will ever bring our country to its knees. If this country ever fails, it will be from the internal rot of damaged brains and skewed emotions of our children, seeking fulfillment through drugs, cutting short their ability to mature, driving them to acts that are unthinkable, and ultimately reducing them to shells with neither brains nor souls. Anything within your vision to interrupt this growing cycle, we know you will take, and we will continue the fight. It is a fight for survival of our society.
That's very powerful. And I know that Tanya has some information about the local drug court here.
I do. Our drug court actually started in September of 1998. Judge Judd, who was a district judge at the time, sort of pushed one of the deputy prosecutors to get something like this going because he had heard about drug courts nationally. And the court system was just filling up with trials of drug cases, and basically this seems like the same people over and over again. So we did some research, and we actually looked into the Spokane drug court first to see what their protocol was. And different agencies came together. We hashed out what would work for us as far as procedures, and went ahead and got started and started taking people in October of 1998.
Do you know how many people have been through the program?
We have 36 people enrolled right now. We've had 123 graduates. 17 have been terminated by their own request. It is a voluntary program. And 19 have been terminated for failing to show up to court. 18 have been terminated for a new arrest. And 34 terminated for continuing to use throughout the program and wouldn't stop. And about 60 others for just various probation violations. So we've had almost 300 people go through our program since we started. And statewide, it really caught fire. Ours was actually the very first drug court in the state. Ada County started their drug court very soon after we did. And as of January of 2006, there are actually 44 drug courts in the state of Idaho. There are 17 adult felony drug courts, 7 adult misdemeanor / DUI courts, 2 adult DUI courts, 9 juvenile drug courts, 7 felony mental health courts, 1 misdemeanor mental health court, and 1 child protection family drug court, which is a fairly new direction.
Now, Joe is a person who has been through drug court, and he's going to tell us why he thinks it's important.
It gives a person a second chance. If it wasn't for this program, I don't know where I'd be today, and I know it's helped a lot of other people. If I didn't know, I wanted to quit, but I didn't know how, and this gave me the opportunity and the tools, and showed me how.
And in part, it's because they keep with you. Is that correct? It's because you have to report and you have to come and be responsible on a regular basis. Can you explain kind of how that works?
Well, you have your treatment you have to go to. When you first start, it was, I'm not sure what it is now, but it was 3 nights a week for 3 hours a night at first, and then you'd go to court every other Tuesday. In front of the judge, and then you'd see your probation officer. So you're on probation, and she can come to he or she can come to your place at any time, and or whatever. So it's pretty intense for a while.
And there can be some testing during this period of time.
Oh yeah, anytime, and it's like I said, it's a great program in my opinion. It gives you the tools for somebody that really wants to quit. It shows you how to do it and gets you on the right track.
Thank you.
Erna Reinhardt.
Welcome to the show, all 3 of you.
Thank you.
My first question will be to Judge Friedlander. Penny, share with us, as the judge overseeing this whole process, there must be some people that are eligible for this drug court and some that aren't. So share with us, what do you look for as the judge in terms of the kind of people that can be placed into this successfully? There must be some parameters.
There are. One is the person to be eligible cannot be someone who has convictions of commission of a violent crime. Also, they go through a substance abuse evaluation and a team kind of screening, if you will, to determine eligibility, whether they would successfully be able to meet the conditions in terms of what we think is a rigorous program, frankly. Tanya, would you add anything to that?
I would. Our criteria is basically set up that we are taking felony, straight possession, prescription frauds, some property crimes if there's not a lot of restitution issues, a lot of victims, that sort of thing that is drug related. And they can't have a prior conviction, as the judge said, for a violent or a sexual offense, and that is by statute. And they have to reside in the county. They have to plead guilty to that felony charge when they come in. Along with the substance abuse evaluation, there's also a risk assessment, criminogenic risk assessment done on them, because we're really looking for the medium to high risk offenders. And so there are some people that aren't eligible for the program just because they are too low need. And it has, excuse me, it's been shown that if you mix low need people with higher risk people, you're actually doing them more harm than good. So a lot of times we do turn people away just basically because their problem isn't severe enough to really warrant this severe of a strict of a program.
And then, Tanya, follow up with what happens to those individuals. Earlier in the show you said how many were in the program and how many were graduates. What happens to those people that aren't able to toe the line and aren't able to follow all of the guidelines? What happens to them?
We basically have two tracks to the program right now. The first track is that they do plead guilty to the felony charge coming into the program. They aren't allowed to withdraw that plea, so they would go straight to sentencing if they're terminated for the program for whatever reason. And the team makes a recommendation to the sentencing judge based on our time with them as to what we think would be an appropriate sentence. But the sentencing judge can do whatever they deem appropriate. The other track that we have are actually people who have been convicted of the felony, and most of them are coming back out of a retained jurisdiction program where they've been in prison for 6 months or coming back out on probation. And so if one of those fail, they're looking at prison. And that's been actually a pretty successful track. But
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's depending on which track you're in, what the outcome is.
We don't accept anyone either who is entering a plea of guilty to anything such as trafficking or delivery or any of those things as well.
Excellent. And Joe, what do you think, is there some aspect of this whole process that worked for you, that was the trigger, that was the hook, that, you said earlier that you tried to quit before, but it just didn't quite work. Is there anything?
There, not one particular thing. It was the whole program. It's, I don't know, it's not really one particular thing. It's, I think you need every step in the program to make it work.
And how long were you in the court system?
When I was in it, it was only 9 months.
Okay.
It's a lot longer now, but yeah, it was a 9 month, and actually I think the being longer is actually better, because that was one of my biggest fears after I did graduate, and now I'm kind of out on my own, and can I do it on my own? Can I stay clean? And that was a big fear of mine for a long time.
I guess I could mention that the carrot, I guess you could put it, to come into the program initially is that you do plead guilty to the felony charge, but it is amended to a misdemeanor if you successfully complete. So that is usually kind of what gets people in the door. And as Joe mentioned, at the beginning of the program, it was 9 months, but the more training that we went to, we realized that 9 months is just way too short to expect them to have a period of sobriety and be able to kick the meth addiction. So we went to 12 months and then just recently switched to 18 months. So the program is 18 months long now.
Excellent.
And if I could address the judge's role, it's also rather unique because it's really a team effort, and there's a partnership that probably isn't traditional in nature. Even though what happens in court on drug court nights is the judge in a black robe and the bailiff being present, and people may be in custody, and it has all the outward trappings of a regular judicial proceeding. Before that, we meet as a team, and that there are people from the drug treatment aspect. The probation officer is present. Tanya, our drug coordinator, is present. We even have someone present specially from the jail to keep a pulse on anyone that we have that might still be in custody. We have a person who was a graduate from our drug court, be a representative, also there. We have defense attorney and a prosecuting attorney present. And we staff before our drug court session, all of us talking about every case. and talk about how a person has been doing, what the UAs or your analysis results have been over the last 2 weeks, what compliance there's been with probation and other conditions. And we talk about if there has been a violation, what the appropriate sanction would be, which could be going to jail that night, frankly, for maybe a month, to writing an essay. So there is that underlying team partnership, and I think what makes drug court successful, frankly, is reiterated really by Joe's statement. It isn't one element, and that's where it makes drug court special. Human beings are complex. Addiction is complex. And what it is it's an attempt to address the whole. We even think about medical health. I don't know if you've heard about dental decay, which can be very exacerbated and severe with methamphetamine use. There are families that are going through the Child Protective Act things, and we talk about services, about families and keeping things healthy and intact and keeping associations positive. It's a very much of a wraparound circumstance.
There's a statistic that Judge John Mitchell provided for me, and he'll be on the program next week, which is just very mind-boggling, and that is that in the state of Idaho, that 77% of those being held in prison in this state have a case that's drug-related. I think that emphasizes so much how important this particular program is. And Judge Friedlander, I would like for you to talk some about, just in our court here, the success rate statistically. And I'll ask Tanya later to talk about it in relation to the other courts around the state. I believe that I am correct in my observation that we have very few programs that have this high success rate. And so if this really catches on, not only in our state, but across the country to the extent it can really affect the prison population.
That's exactly right. And I think nationally the statistics are it's about twice as successful as any other kind of treatment to do drug court. And the reason we think is because of that immediacy of sanction and that team approach and those wrapped expectations. You know, if you just have an individual that's going to treatment, they can walk out of treatment. I mean, here there's monitoring and sanctions, there's curfew. I mean, we even expect that one of our participants, all of our participants, have to have a GED or a high school diploma at the time that they're through drug court. They have to be either working or they have to be doing job search, which is looking for employment and touching base with 10 employers per day. It involves so much more accountability than the obvious just drug test. So at least twice the rate of success. And Tanya, I know you have the statistics because you're the keeper of such things for our drug court of the actual percentages. Could you share that?
May I just interrupt to indicate that I want to particularly talk, you gave the data of over 300 and you mentioned 123 graduated from that program. Of those who graduate, I would start with that, Judge. What is the success rate of those, such as Joe? And by the way, it's been 5 years, I guess. So you've
Almost seven.
Almost seven. So that's a great success story. Isn't the rate very successful of those who finish the program?
It is very high. We actually have some data from an evaluation that was done in April of 2003 by Shelley Johnson-Listwan and Ed Latessa from the University of Cincinnati. The Supreme Court contracted with them to be sort of our statewide evaluator. And at that time, the only two programs that really had enough data to analyze were our program and Ada County's program. And basically what they came up with from reviewing all the information that we had was they had three groups: our graduates, the people that were eligible for the program but didn't come in for whatever reason they chose not to. That was the comparison group. And then the people who were in the program but were not successful.
Okay.
So for rearrests, our non-graduates, people that were not successful, had a recidivism rate of 60%. The comparison group, it was 53%, and the graduates are 20%. Being the rearrest being for a drug charge, the non-graduates were 54%, the comparison group 55%, and graduates 12%. And being arrested multiple times, the non-graduates were 30%, the comparison group 24%, and our graduates 2%.
I am really so pleased you gave those statistics. They are astounding. In any area, in any subject matter in our country, dealing with education and training and all that, those statistics would hold up against any comparison. So I guess my next question is back to the judge, and then I'll deal one with Mr. Miller. With that kind of success rate, isn't that, based on what we've already talked about today, one, you can't just get into this program just to avoid jail or prison, saying, I'll just play this game and go through this. It is very, very strict. It's got very high standards. It's very rigorous. And as you've learned through this process, aren't you very pleased that you are doing the requirements in the right way?
I don't even know how to answer that, Tony. I would invite you and members of the public to come to our graduations, come to our drug court sessions, because seeing it is believing it. And my inspiration for drug court is given to me by people like Joe and the participants there who are working, I know, so hard, day in and day out, not only not doing certain things, but to do positive things, to replace behaviors, to be contributing, to be givers, to be constructive, to love their children, to be parents, to be well. They inspire me. And so it's real easy to keep my gas tank full of high octane with people like Joe and others that we graduate. We have, at our graduations, we have family members speak if they would like to be given that opportunity. And the thing that I hear most singularly from family members is thank you for giving me my husband, my wife, my son, or my daughter back to me.
It's a good lead into Joe. And Joe, like we said, you've been so successful. It's years of proof. I guess I have a two-part question for you. We've today made it very clear the rigor of this program. And would you testify to the fact that if it had been more lenient, would you have possibly not been as successful as you have?
Yeah, there's a possibility. There's a possibility. I think for me and everybody else that's in the program, you need that structure, and you need to be that, it needs to be that hard.
I would like for you to do something else, if you would, please, to those who are not in the program, but they may be into drugs, or they may be tempted to head that direction. You're a very good example of what kind of advice you should give them. Would you like to speak to those in the audience that might be heading the wrong direction? What advice would you have for them?
Get help. Get help. Talk to somebody. Get a hold of a drug counselor or an NA meetings or somebody. If you have to, call the drug court program. I'm sure they can schedule, they can find somebody. But get help. Like I said, if it wasn't for this program, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't think I'd be alive. And it's scary. And I've got my life back, and,
The other guests here, that's music in their ear to know that saving lives is so important. One final question to you, and that is, in the program, I sense, and I'm doing this from a distance and hearing, not knowing too much about the program, but it seems to me that one of the things that you and others may get, and correct me if I'm wrong, but oftentimes is it not true that people may turn to drugs because they feel somewhat isolated, or they're not getting the support? Or I just sense in this program there's caring for you, there's a very much affection, caring for human beings. Was that helpful to you?
Oh yeah. But anybody can get into the drugs. It's scary, and all it takes is just to try it one time. But having the support, but having the support of being in the program really helped. My family stuck behind me, and all the way they're still a great support system for me. But the whole program is a great support system. You could talk to anybody, in the program, and they'll help you.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
I have a question. I'm going to ask about 3 different worlds. The first world, Tanya, is the world of drug use. And can you tell us what kinds of addictions you're seeing in the world of drug use?
For our court in particular, it is definitely methamphetamine. That is the primary drug that we're seeing, and not only just that they're charged with, but that they're using. And a lot of them have, marijuana use as well, alcohol use, some cocaine use, and so it's definitely a poly substance. But meth is the primary problem that we are having.
Now, Joe, my question, and I'm going to work off what Tony said here just a minute ago and your answer to him, the world of addiction. And some of our viewers out there may say, it can't happen to me. But you just said it can happen to anyone, and I think we know that. So tell us, what is the world of addiction like? What is it like when you're in the throes of that addiction?
It's horrible. It's the only thing you ever think. It's the only thing you think about. Is where you're going to get your next high at. How you're going to get the money to pay for it. That's all you think about. You don't care about. You care about your family and friends and that, but they're so far down on the ladder. That's your main goal is to get your next high, and it's horrible. It's horrible.
And so that's the world of addiction. Now, Judge Friedlander, what is the world of the courts? And can you also tell us a little bit about DUI court and the distinction between DUI and drug court, and the similarities as well, but the world of the courts and the specialty courts, how they fit together?
In about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. All right, that's really quick. In the world of courts, how drug court would fit specifically is it's right now it's an additional part of our court system. It isn't in the normal working days. It's in the week nights that we do drug court. There's a lot of work, as you can tell by Tanya, behind the scenes to prepare for drug court, but that frankly, it is something that is done in the evening times because in addition to our regular judicial responsibilities, if you would say it's an extra, and I think in Idaho right now most courts are facing that, which is a time issue.
On that note, we have to bring the program to conclusion. Judge, one thing happens on this program, the clock is never lost. It always wins out every time. Thank you so much for getting this all together for us, and thank all three of our guests. You have been inspiring and you've been very helpful to our audience, and again, congratulations on what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, please be with us again next week at this same time, and we will continue discussion about the mental health drug courts in the state of Idaho. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.